Stop by my apartment Thursday. We'll go over your performance privately. I stared at the message in disbelief. That wasn't how performance reviews were handled. Not after hours, not off-site, and definitely not at someone's home. My name is Elliot Mason, and for nearly a decade, I worked as senior compliance officer at Halworth Publishing in Boston. I'm not the kind of man who looks for conflict, but I know when something's out of line. The message came from Rachel Lennox, our new director. On paper, she was impressive: 3 major firms, a turnaround expert full of charm and efficiency talk. The executive board loved her, but what they didn't see was how quickly the professionalism stopped behind closed doors. It started with flattery, a comment about my shirt, then my cologne, then whether I worked out. I kept my answers short, neutral, always steering the conversation back to work. But the comments kept coming. The visits to my office became more frequent. She lingered longer after meetings. She texted about audits late at night, then shifted into personal messages about running, being new in town, being lonely. When she sent a photo of herself in gym clothes with the caption, "Do you run?" I didn't respond. But her next move, the apartment invitation, was the line I wouldn't cross. And somehow I knew saying no wouldn't be the end of it. It would be the start of something far worse. I didn't go to Rachel Lennox's apartment that Thursday night. Instead, I stared out my window overlooking the Boston skyline, phone in hand, the message still unread but burned into memory. I'd given this company, Halworth Publishing, 9 years of steady, quiet commitment. I started in the mailroom. Studied for my compliance certification during graveyard shifts. Climbed one rung at a time, never cutting corners, never playing politics. I made it a point to stay out of drama. But this wasn't just workplace tension. It was a landmine. The next morning, Rachel didn't look at me once during our team meeting. Her tone was clipped, and she asked questions she already knew the answers to. Just not to me. It was subtle, but the message was loud and clear. I'd just been moved to her problem list. I confided in Tom Draper, our compliance counsel, later that day. I kept it professional, not naming names, just general discomfort. His advice was textbook: document everything, so I did. I saved every message, I organized timelines. I printed performance reviews, every one of them spotless. The following Monday, Rachel called a department-wide meeting. Unusual timing. I knew something was off the moment I stepped into the conference room. HR was there. So was legal. So was she, with a folder in her hands. "We're restructuring the compliance team," she began. "As of Friday, Elliot's position will be phased out." No warning. No explanation beyond strategic alignment. I kept my composure. I'd seen enough corporate politics to recognize retaliation dressed up in HR language. But I wasn't going quietly. I requested a private meeting with Elaine Howard, our HR director, someone I'd worked with for years. I laid everything out: the late-night text, the flirtation, the inappropriate photo, and of course, the apartment message. Elaine looked uncomfortable but concerned. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. "I do," I said, handing her a flash drive and printouts. Every word. She promised a formal review. I left feeling cautious, maybe even hopeful. That hope lasted exactly 36 hours. When I returned to work on Wednesday, my login credentials were deactivated. My email was locked. I was being walked out, quietly but unmistakably, like a threat. Rachel had filed a counterclaim. According to her, I had made advances. When she declined, I'd grown hostile. She spun the entire story in reverse, casting herself as the victim and me as the aggressor. And it worked. HR wasn't asking questions anymore. They were mitigating risk. I packed my things: a coffee mug, a picture of my parents, my framed certification. As I reached the elevator escorted by security, I didn't feel rage. I felt cold clarity. She thought I'd disappear quietly. She thought wrong. That night, I spread out every shred of evidence across my kitchen table. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to uncover the full truth. And if Rachel had done this before, someone else had been caught in her crosshairs, and I was going to find them. That evening, I dug deeper. I wasn't just trying to defend my name anymore. I wanted the full picture. If Rachel Lennox had flipped the script on me so convincingly, chances were this wasn't her first time. Her moves were too calculated, too polished. This was a pattern. I started with LinkedIn. 4 companies in 8 years. That's not unusual in publishing unless you look closer. Each of her roles was lateral, same job titles, similar responsibilities. No upward climb, no executive leap, just quick exits, one every 2 years or less. No fanfare, No professional endorsements, no mention of why she left. That's when I called Jennifer Marsh, a former colleague who'd worked with our previous director before Rachel. She had left Halworth just before Rachel came on board. If anyone knew what the hiring transition looked like, it was her. I heard what happened. Jennifer said the moment she picked up. Let me guess. Rachel flipped it on you. I froze. You've seen this before. She's done it before. Just not here. I heard from a friend at Northbridge Capital that she got quietly let go. Similar setup. A male subordinate. Things got messy. Why didn't this come up in the hiring process? Because she negotiated a confidential separation. No paper trail, just a pursuing new opportunities press release. It's how predators keep moving. Clean exits, new starts, that hit hard. So this wasn't just a personal vendetta, it was a tactic. A cycle? And I wasn't the first casualty. Through Jennifer, I got in touch with Beth Turner, who had worked in HR at Northbridge. We met at a cafe in Providence, both of us looking over our shoulders. Beth wasted no time. Rachel targeted a man named Kevin Santos. Same pattern, compliments, late-night texts, veiled invitations. He finally pushed back, politely like you did. She filed a complaint, claimed he had harassed her. The company panicked. Fired them both. Kevin lost everything. Rachel walked away with a severance and a reference letter. My chest tightened. Did you document this? Beth pulled out a slim folder. Not officially. But I kept my own notes, just in case. You're the first person who's come forward. Kevin was too broken to fight. I took the folder and thanked her. This was bigger than me now. Rachel didn't just retaliate, she weaponized HR procedures. And until now, she'd gotten away with it. Back at home, I compiled everything Rachel's messages to me, my performance reviews, the suspicious timing of her, restructuring, and now, Beth's records from Northbridge. I reached out to David Kim, an employment attorney with a reputation for handling retaliation and wrongful termination cases. David took one look at the material and nodded. This is textbook pattern behavior. We're not just looking at wrongful termination, we're talking sexual harassment, retaliation, defamation, especially if we connect your case with Kevin's. He drafted a demand letter addressed to Halworth's legal team and HR. It outlined Rachel's actions, documented her prior behavior at another firm, and made one thing clear: if Halworth didn't act, we would. We gave them 7 days. On day 3, they folded. Halworth called an emergency meeting. Their legal counsel, the CEO, HR Director Elaine Howard, David and I sat across from them. Calm, they didn't argue, they didn't deny. Instead, they opened with, Rachel Lennox is no longer with the company. Then came the offer: reinstatement with full back pay, restoration of all benefits, and a formal apology. But David wasn't done. That addresses the job. What about the damage to his name? After 2 hours, we walked out with a signed agreement. A 6-month settlement, a sealed apology, and a line in the sand: Rachel's pattern had ended. For the first time in weeks, I breathed. But the battle wasn't just mine. 2 weeks later, Kevin Santos called me. Beth told me what you did. I just wanted to say thank you. You gave me back something I lost, my voice. I returned to Halworth Publishing a different person. Not because I had changed, but because the people around me had. Before, they had seen me as a nerdy, stoic compliance guy, a boringly serious guy. But now I walked into a conference room, and people stopped talking. Not out of fear, out of respect. The day I returned, HR held a reorientation session. They said it was standard procedure after an employee had been suspended and reinstated. I didn't react. I knew it was their way of saving face. I let it be. No need to crush anyone. The real victory was that I hadn't fallen. My position had been upgraded to Senior Director of Compliance and Ethics, and I now had my own office, my own budget, and, most importantly, the authority to review all the internal processes I had only had input into before. I didn't forget Rachel, but I didn't need to mention her again. What I did next was the clearest statement of all. I began rewriting the company's code of ethics. I included clearer terms about personal relationships between superiors and subordinates. I required mandatory workplace harassment training for all middle managers. I set up an internal complaint line that was completely anonymous, outside the company's IT system, handled by a third party. What I had wished for when it all started. I was the one who created it. And then one day, an email quietly landed in my inbox. No subject line, no signature. She did the same thing to me in 2016. I didn't have the guts to speak. You did. Thank you. Jay. I didn't know who Jay was. It could have been Kevin. It could have been someone else. But I knew one thing: I was no longer fighting alone. And perhaps I was never as alone as I thought. That fall, I was invited to speak at an industry conference in Chicago. The topic was building a safe and integrity workplace from the inside out. I stood before a room full of business leaders, HR, and legal counsel. I told my story. I didn't name names. I didn't criticize anyone. I just told the truth. As I walked off stage, 3 people in the audience came up to shake my hand. One man whispered, "I chose to stay silent, too. Thank you for not doing that." I was no longer the Elliot Mason of 9 years ago, the one who sat silently when someone crossed a line. Now I was the one who stood up, looked them in the eye, and said, "No, not here." 6 months later, I got a call I'll never forget. "Elliot, there's a message from Kevin Torres in the reception room," my assistant announced over the intercom. I stood up immediately. Kevin was the guy whose career Rachel Lennox had ruined at the previous company. Thanks to Beth, a former HR executive at Northwick, we connected after my story was resolved. Today, he sent a package. No message, just a handwritten note and a small notebook. The letter read, "Elliot, it took me 4 years to regain my confidence. And then I heard you did what I didn't dare. Stand up and fight her. I'm no longer in compliance. I run a small auto repair shop in Oregon. But I've been following your story from afar. Here's my old notebook. It has the events, the dates, and some of the evidence I collected when Rachel started to cross the line with me. I don't know if it's still legal. But if you're building something bigger, I think it should be in the right hands, Kevin." I sat silently for a few minutes, holding the small notebook, each page a trace of someone who wanted to speak up but was forced to stay silent to survive. And then I knew this was no longer just a personal matter. That same week, attorney David Kim and I began the next step, setting up a nonprofit dedicated to supporting people who had been harassed in the workplace but lacked the power to speak up. The name of the organization was Credence, a word that means belief in truth and justice. Credence started small: a website, a hotline, a collaborative legal team. But within 3 months, we had fielded more than 200 cases from all over the country. Many were white-collar workers, some were teachers, some were nurses and engineers, all with one thing in common: they had been sidelined after saying no to their superiors' misconduct. My story was shared anonymously in many industry forums. Companies that had previously hired Rachel were coming to terms with violations that had been buried in personal severance agreements. I'm not publishing the details of the lawsuit with Halworth Publishing because of legal obligations, but I know people are starting to understand the truth. I don't feel gloating. I don't need to. Instead, I feel calm knowing that I wasn't crushed by the system I once believed in. I survived the storm and used that experience to set a warning beacon for others. If there's anything I've learned from all that's happened, it's this: silence never protects the innocent. It only protects the powerful. And when the right people are brave enough to speak up, they not only save themselves, they light the way for others. I didn't say a word. I just stared at the HR rep as she slid the termination form across the table. After 9 years of spotless service at Halworth Publishing, this was how they let me go: no warning, no explanation, just a thin smile and the word, restructure. But I knew the truth. I'd rejected Rachel Lennox's inappropriate advances. I kept everything professional while she blurred every boundary: late-night texts, an invitation to her apartment, then silence. Then this: she was smart. She played the victim, claimed I had made her uncomfortable. HR chose her word over mine. But they didn't know what I had: screenshots, messages, timelines, and receipts. This wasn't the end. It was the start of a bigger fight. I walked out quietly, but not empty-handed. And I wasn't going to be silent anymore. Sometimes the people in power will rewrite the story to protect themselves. But your truth matters. Document everything. Speak up, even if your voice shakes, because silence only protects those who abuse it. Have you ever faced injustice at work and been told to let it go? Share your story in the comments. We're listening. If this story moved you, give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories of courage, dignity, and quiet strength.